Good day and welcome to another segment of In the Spotlight. I'm Superintendent Michael Richard, and today I'm very pleased to be joined by my Assistant Superintendent, Kevin McQuillan. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
All right, it's been a couple of years here, but we found a way to sneak you in under the wire. Kevin, tell the audience at home a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, and really how'd you end up here in West Springfield?
Well, I grew up in Ireland, actually, and lived there until I was 25. When I was at college, I met an exchange student from UMass named Annie Ryan. She's from Northampton, Massachusetts. And long story short, we fell in love. I moved over here when we got married in Northampton. We met at University College Dublin, which is where I took my business degree. When I came over to the States, we initially settled in the Boston area. We lived there for about 3 years, and then decided it was time to start a family, and we're reluctant to do that in the Boston area, so I looked for a job in the Pioneer Valley. And the very first job I applied for was business manager for the West Springfield schools, and I've been here since.
That's outstanding. It's funny, as we're about to launch we're in the midst of a business manager search.
Right.
A few removed from when you were in that role, but
Right.
But it's pretty exciting. Talk to the audience at home about the roles that you've served: business manager and then assistant superintendent for business and personnel.
So when I came here first, there was a new superintendent at the time, Bill O'Shea, and he was looking around for a business manager because the business manager was here at the time, left at the same time. So he hired me.
Was it because you were Irish, Kevin? I mean, I'm hearing Bill O'Shea and now I'm hearing Kevin McQuillan.
I got to tell you, I was amazed when I came here first that there were so many Irish people in West Springfield, or people of Irish extraction. So many who had been to Ireland. There was definitely a comfort level there for me. But Bill O'Shea was the superintendent for about 10 years. I worked with him. And then continued to work in that capacity as business manager with Dr. Murata, and she took over. And then at one point, there was a situation where they needed to fill the assistant superintendent position, and they asked me to step into it. And we had at the time around that time, we hired an assistant business manager. And the assistant business manager was a person of great capability, and she became the business manager over time. And so my responsibilities included, at that time, oversight of business, transportation, food service, construction projects, human resources, basically anything non-curricular that was happening in the district.
And you still do that work today?
For the most part, yes.
Yeah.
There have been some changes recently, but yeah, all that stuff is still going on.
So let's talk about your work with construction projects. You've been able to oversee, in large part from the district perspective, the middle school project, the high school project, and now Coburn, not to mention John Ashley additions and whatnot. So tell me about your role and what you've seen evolve in that industry over the years.
So when I came, there was a big push on to move to the middle school concept, and the district decided to go with team teaching, and in anticipation of being able to move from an old junior high model to a middle school. The old junior high was an old building then. We're talking about the 1980s. And it took about 10 years to be able to get that project together, get it through MSBA, and get it funded through the town. It actually failed a number of debt exclusion overrides back then before the town came up with a way to fund it from the debt schedule that they were planning ahead for the years to come, which was a great advantage to us. And the project was able to get built. So in 1998, we opened the middle school, which was the largest construction project I think the town had done since the high school, for sure, and was the first one that had gone through the kind of modern, at that time, the modern version of the Massachusetts School Building Authority. So then that was quite a successful project. It had a lot of wide support in the end, and it has proved a very good school for us in that time. It's now been open for 21 years, which is hard to believe, because I remember it took about 10 years to get done in the first place. Then there was major changes in the the Massachusetts School Building Authority structure, and it went on hiatus for a while they transferred it from the Department of Ed to the State Treasurer's Office. And during that transition, we filed for applications for some other construction projects, work that needed to be done to the schools as the infrastructure was aging. A lot of schools in this town were built at the height of the baby boom, or when the baby boom hit the school age. So we had a lot of our schools that had been built in the 50s. So one thing led to another, and we had to prioritize as to what school we were going to address. And there were some concerns about the high school at that time, because there was one wing of the high school in particular that was showing its age very badly. And we were very lucky that we were able to get the chairman of the school building authority to come, or the director rather of the school building authority to come down at the time. And she looked at the site and said, you know, we're really not interested in renovating a school like this, which was our original intent, just to renovate it. They said, but if you're interested, we have a model school program, and we would support construction of a new school if you're able to build it on this or another site. And that was a major revelation to us at the time. So luckily, again, there was a lot of support in town. At that time, we'd moved to the mayoral form of government. Mayor Gibson was a big enthusiastic supporter of it, and with his help and the help of others at the time, particularly former State Senator Steve Bonaconti, who was very helpful in that period of time, we got it approved and through, and we got a brand new high school out of it, and here we are. And then now, again, the old junior high, which was replaced by the middle school 21 years ago, and which was considered obsolete back then, has continued to serve us and serve us well as an elementary school. But it is bursting at the seams, and having been built in the 1920s as a junior high school, 100 years later is no longer serving the function that you would expect of a modern elementary school. So again, with great support from the town, from Mayor Sullivan, who initiated it, now Mayor Reichelt, and with the funding support of the town council, we're able to go ahead and construct a new Coburn Elementary School.
So lots of changes here in West Springfield, certainly over the time that you've been here. And one of the things that we continue to deal with is growing enrollment, which is behind some of the work that we're doing. And we're getting ready in a short time to open up 4 portable classrooms at Tatum School, just to service, when you mentioned bursting at the seams, we truly are bursting at the seams across the district. So talk to me about that little bit of construction work that's happened in a quick turnaround time here in Westside.
Sure. So one of the problems with the Massachusetts School Building Authority process is that it can be very lengthy. It took us 10 years to get the middle school built. It took a good period of time to get the high school built, even being able to avail of the model school program, which was a shortcut in the process. And it took another 6 or 8 years, or will have taken another 6 or 8 years, for the Coburn School project to open up. So there are school districts around the state who are looking to be able to do something outside of the MSBA process. We, as a community here in West Springfield, are very lucky. We benefit from the upper end of the reimbursement scale. We've got 80% of eligible costs on both the high school and Coburn School. Other towns do not benefit to that degree, so they've been looking around at other ways to get schools built that are quicker turnaround. And so there's a lot of interest now in building outside the MSBA process for those that have to do it. Here in West Springfield, we've continued to see a growth in enrollment. In fact, we're the only district, I think, in the Pioneer Valley which has had consistent enrollment growth over the past, I believe it's 8 years now. Everybody else is declining or it's up and down. So we see these spikes that pop up every now and again in different elementary schools depending on the demographics in a particular year. Tatham and Mittenegg and Memorial are all seeing spikes. Tatham was particularly hard hit over the past year, and there was we kicked around the idea of modular classrooms, basically what we used to call portables. We had a project that we did at Ashley School about 18 years ago now, when we went to all-day kindergarten and needed more space. We've done, then about 10 years ago, we did an addition, a 4-classroom addition on Fawsey School to deal with an enrollment increase there. So at Tatham, when it came up last year, one of the suggestions was that we add some modular classrooms, and the mayor kind of fast-tracked that process, and we're about to occupy 4 modular classrooms at Tatham School in the next week or so.
It's pretty amazing. Kevin, you started off talking about how you ended up here in West Springfield and how you came to the United States as an immigrant. Tell me a little bit, from your perspective as an immigrant yourself, what have you seen in West Springfield in terms of our changing demographics over the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and some of the challenges that you yourself have seen in your position?
So it's definitely one of the big trends in my tenure here. Not long after I started, we began to see our first, what we used to call transitional bilingual education programs. Back then, if you had more than 25 students in a particular language group, you had to have a transitional bilingual program for them to teach them in that language. We had 3 back then. We had a Vietnamese one, Spanish, and Russian. The Vietnamese one did not last very long. It was a small group. They assimilated well and went through the schools with great ease and adapted very well. The Spanish population, which has continued to be a presence here, is still with us, and we saw that kind of culminate 2 years ago with the refugees from the Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. It's continued to be a big thing for us. The Russian one was originally, I believe, Pentecostalist religious refugees from Russia who were settled in the area. And what tends to happen is the population comes here, they settle here, they find it's a good place to live, and it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy with other people come and are comfortable here. We have the mosque here in West Springfield. So all these populations have continued to come to West Springfield and thrive and grow, and it's definitely been reflected in the makeup of the community, the schools community in particular. And we have evolved as that has gone on. We started off dealing with bilingual education as best we could, hiring teachers from those countries, hiring teachers from Russia particularly, I remember. But now all that has evolved. The whole education model for English language learners has changed. Now it's done through English, but it's much broader and much more embedded in the school district as a whole. All teachers have to have an English language learner certification now, or added to their certification. So we've seen major changes in it. We've also seen some of these kids who go through the program come back and work for us in the schools, which is always great. I think it's been very healthy for West Springfield. I think the diversity is good. I think it's been well handled over the years. And it's very much part of the community in town.
For sure. That sheltered English immersion endorsement that you're referring to is something that is required for all of our
Right.
teachers as they recertify or as they enter the workforce. And so we've seen a lot of change. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, history lesson for those in West Side. We know that we've got a lot of history of neighborhood schools here in
Right.
West Springfield, and we're down to 5 elementary schools now. Talk to me about some of them that have come and gone, that are no longer in use.
Well, that actually predates me, but not by too long. A major change that hit West Springfield and on all school districts and communities in Massachusetts was Proposition 2.5, when that came in back in the very beginning of the 1980s. And it limited the amount by which taxation could increase in any given year, local taxation. So it put a cap on the community's ability to continue to expand. And there was a lot of resettling of how things were done, reviewing of how things were done. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the so-called marginal schools were eliminated. A lot of staff were laid off because we couldn't afford, or the communities couldn't afford to fund their budgets at the same level. So there was a lot of staff cutbacks in schools, and in West Springfield in particular, several school buildings were closed. So there was a school on Park Street, the Main Street School, McDonough School, Old Tatham were all closed at that time. And in fact, that became a big issue when we were building the middle school, because the response from sections of the community was, well, why did you close all these little schools if you want to build another school now? But there were much different population trends at that time, and a lot of these schools that were closed were not great buildings. There were I know I believe it was in Park Street School. I believe the cafeteria was in the boiler room in the basement. So there were things like that. That they were closed because they were the marginal schools. But it definitely was difficult for a lot of neighborhoods in town, and it carried through. We heard about it for years afterwards.
Sure.
And at this point, we're at the stage now where probably the only true neighborhood school that we have at the moment is Mittenegg, because the catchment areas, the elementary school districts served by the other schools are much larger. And Mittenegg is technically our only walking school, which means it doesn't have a regular bus service. Everybody's close enough to walk, whereas the other schools all have to have buses because of the distances that students have to cover to get to and from school.
Kevin, you're set to retire at the end of this school year, and you've given the district a lot of years of service, and a very large part of your life has been serving students and staff here in West Springfield. It's a long period of time, but I want you to try to think about what might be your greatest memory of your time here in West Springfield.
Well, it's hard to pick out a greatest memory. As I sit here talking to you, I think of things like the construction projects. I think of things like the changes in the community. I think of things like the change in the form of government, which was a huge change. really. When I came, everything was done through representative town meeting, and it was much more restricted in terms of how things got funded and what got funded and so forth. That going from there to a mayoral form of government, the town council, the changes in the charter, and some of those changes were very, very gradual. The move to a central maintenance department, for example, was in the original charter but took almost 12 years, I believe, to implement. So that was one of those things that has changed over a long period of time, and sometimes you don't really feel the effect of the change, but looking back over it, you can see that it was radical.
So Kevin, I'll close with this. Every guest gets the opportunity to suggest another individual to join me in the spotlight, and that's how we keep this show rolling. So who would you like to see featured in the spotlight in a future segment?
Well, I don't know if you'd be interested, but I'd certainly like to hear a conversation with Carrie Sheehan. Carrie has been the business manager here for, I think it's almost 13 years. He's retiring in January. He's a local resident, but he came to us with vast experience from being a business manager in the city of Springfield. In fact, at one time when we rented out the cowing school to a charter school in Springfield, he and I negotiated the lease on that. He for Springfield schools and me for the West Springfield schools. So when the position became vacant at that time 13 years ago, and he was interested, it was such a home run for West Springfield. I think he's been a fantastic person to have here, very calm, very even-handed, and extremely competent. And for those people who don't know him, I'd love that they would have the opportunities to know him, because he's just been great for West Springfield.
I love the idea. I think that he's going to require a little more arm twisting.
I think he will.
To get him here, but
he doesn't toot his own horn. But
no, he doesn't. But he should.
Yeah.
But he should. Thank you, Kevin. Right. It's been a real pleasure to be joined by Kevin McQuillan and get a little bit of a history lesson on the schools here in West Springfield over the last few decades. And we look forward to many more memories for the West Springfield Public Schools and the community. Thank you for joining me in the Spotlight. Have a great day.